Hey everybody, welcome to the Level Up Leadership Podcast. My name is Mike Delgado.
My name is Patty Guevara.
This podcast is designed to help you get to know the leaders here at Experian and also gain insight into the leadership skills and traits needed to grow our careers.
In this podcast, we'll talk mentorship, career navigation, handling rejection, work-life balance, mental health, diversity and inclusion, and so much more.
We hope you enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, this is Patty. We hope you're staying safe and we hope that our COVID-19 podcast episodes on ways to manage your mental health have been helpful. As we settle into this new normal, we do want to start bringing back relevant leadership conversations. These conversations were recorded prior to the pandemic and we talk about various topics unrelated. As always, we do hope that you enjoy today's episode. Today we're speaking to Maia Young, Associate Professor of Organization and Management and Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs at UCI. Maia's research examines the psychology of individual decision-making in the workplace and how decisions can be affected by emotions, culture, and more. Maia spoke at Experian during International Women's Week last year, and we were very eager to have her as a guest on Level Up. Can you go over your background?
Sure. Yeah. Like how far back? I grew up in Iowa. I was an undergrad in psychology, and then I did a couple years of work and decided that I could really see how leadership mattered and how psychology could inform business practices. And someone told me during those 2 years about the field of organizational behavior, which is a interdisciplinary field within businesses. And I checked it out and I decided to go get a PhD in organizational behavior. I did both my undergrad and my grad work at Stanford. So Stanford undergrad psychology and Stanford PhD in graduate school of business. And then I got my first job. I was lucky enough to get my first job at UCLA. I taught there for 13 years.
Wow.
I guess that means I've been in California for a good number of years now. This is what I've been doing. And I've been lucky enough to have mentors along the way. I've been lucky enough to have students who have given me the feedback, for better or worse, that has pushed me to grow. And I love what I do. I do.
Can you talk about your favorite research you've done recently?
Most of my research these days is on emotions and how emotions affect our decision making. And the paper that I'm working on now that's under review at a peer-reviewed journal is a more broad theoretical paper. I'm trying to encourage the field of psychology and organizational behavior to think about feelings in a different way. So my argument in that paper is that the way we talk about emotions is so much in our head and not as much about how we feel. So I think the way we talk about emotions and emotions research is a lot about what are the thoughts you're having while you're feeling those things. But we know that's only part of the experience of emotions, right? Those thoughts are only part of it. Part of it is what it makes you want to do, what you're motivated to do, how much energy you have. So those kind of other experiences as part of the emotion need to really be captured into emotions research. So that's the one that I'm the most proud of right now because I feel like it's my more broader thinking work. You know, it's not just one paper or a few set of studies that I'm trying to summarize, but it's kind of me trying to take a broader look on the field. But I don't know if I should talk about it because it's also not published yet.
So what drove you to do this research? Because it's a very fascinating topic, how emotions impact our decision making.
Honestly, what drove this is that I started doing work on emotions and decision-making about 10 years ago. And I felt that along the way, I was noticing certain trends. I was noticing that, hey, my early work had made certain mistakes, and that was part of the norms of the field. And so what I wanted to do was to just give some perspective on what I've seen doing this work and some of the mistakes I'm trying to correct in my own work, as well as trying to encourage other people to consider carefully the choices they're making when they're doing the research too.
So now I'm curious about what are some of these common mistakes we make in our decision making when it comes to our emotions?
Oh, well, so I think I'm going to have to adjust your question a little bit because what I found is surprisingly, sometimes we end up making better decisions in an emotional state than we would otherwise. And that was very surprising to me. I was very much under the assumption from the beginning that we all have to calm down, and that's the common thought, right? And so what I ended up finding is there are some situations where this impetus, this motivation that's associated with the emotion can actually improve your decision making. And it's not always. And I definitely, I like talking about how complex the situation is, because it's no longer as simple as emotions good, no emotion, emotions bad, no emotions good. Mm-hmm. It's no longer as simple as, oh, this particular emotion good, happiness good, anger bad. It's even more complex than that. It's when is happiness helping us? When is anger actually helping us? And so a lot of my research has been on anger and some of the ways it can hurt and some of the ways it can actually lead to better decision-making performance. And I should place an asterisk here because I am almost never looking at interpersonal decision-making. So should I speak back to somebody in a harsh way? Should I be sarcastic and snide? Those are not the kind of decisions I'm looking at. These are more individual decision-making tasks. If you walk into work and you're already a little bit irked about your commute, you're already irked about some memo you got, how is that going to affect the next thing and the next task you take on?
That's right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I was just thinking about how so many times we interpret the email we just read based on our mood.
Oh, email.
Right?
Yes.
It can be the person can have the best intentions.
Oh, yes.
There's so much room to misunderstand each
right?
other.
Yes.
And then but then the reader we're coming to it as a, something just bad just happened, or we just got a phone call, we got irritated, or whatever it is, and we can interpret that email.
Yeah, and we could even misread one word, and it changes the whole thing. But of course, there is a problem with that form of media for delicate conversations, and even ones that you think might not be so crucial. It can be taken the wrong way. And so studies upon studies have shown, number one, that people feel anger more than most emotions at work. And so it's a prevalent emotion. And email is more and more the main mode of conversations. And so what do we take from this? It's kind of a delicate situation.
I think it's a very practical conversation to have around work and email because, so much of the things we're doing at our work is messaging people, sending notes, agendas, those types of things. And I would hope that all of us are trying to be nice and cordial in our emails, but they can be misread. And do you have advice for those who are composing emails?
I do. Well, the first step is to consider whether the email is the best forum. And of course, I understand regionally disparate teams, you sometimes need to. I really encourage my students to take time with a more tricky, an email that you want to make sure is being received well. And I encourage them to explicitly state their intention. So, for example, to say, my intention with this email is to try to reach out to you and bridge the conversation. I'm hoping that we can just continue on a better route. And I just, whatever it is that your intention is, expressing your good intention is a skill. And too often people assume that assumption that your intentions can be understood through just the plain text. And it's not. You have to say more with your words than you would in person, because in person, someone can see your face, your facial expression. Someone can hear the tone in your voice. Someone can tell when you're pausing. you might be able to be more elaborative in a face-to-face conversation about the context and all of that, the way you see the context. All of that is stripped down in an email that might be just shot off very quickly. And it just leaves more to interpretation. One of the things I do in one of my classes is to have people understand more about culturally similar facial expressions and how our faces are kind of automatically set to convey these emotions. For sometimes display rules in cultures are more open, and sometimes it's more natural in cultures to kind of downplay it.
Right.
But so there are some cultural differences, but there are so many cultural similarities. And I have students go through this exercise where they learn about the cultural similarities and differences.
Oh, cool.
And the whole hope of that is not just to be able to infer by looking, but to also begin conversations about how people are doing at work and to make my students more comfortable having an interpersonal conversation that might sound something like, oh, hey, I noticed you flinched a little bit at that announcement today. How's it hitting you? How's it going to affect your unit? How's it going to affect the way that you do your work? And just connecting with people on that level. And so I had students do this unit on it, and they came back and reported how it played out in their work when they tried both looking at people's reactions at work or people's facial expressions and also initiating these kind of conversations. And by and large, they said, I just saw people in a different way at work. I saw their faces. And then I took a little bit of bravery to step out of my normal water cooler discussion and to have a conversation about how someone was doing or how something was affecting them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to approach it, just because I have a coworker who can read me like a book. I feel like I'm not that expressive in the things I do, but she notices my little mannerisms where if I'm maybe irritated or if I'm overwhelmed, if maybe I take too long of a pause to smile, she'll be like, what's wrong? Yeah. And it just makes me feel seen as a human being in the workplace. I'm not just this robot who has a goal to meet, and it's just being asked how are you? Or how did that make you feel? It's just it makes a huge difference.
That's well said. I mean, you're being seen, and that makes a difference because you're spending how many hours a day at work?
A majority.
Yeah. You can't just say, oh, okay, I'll be seen at 5:00 or something. This is a big part of our lives. And so it's worth it to make it a good environment. And that's the type of thing where it's this micro moment, right? Where somebody says oh, you paused there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a long conversation, like a therapy session. It's just, we're connecting with each other at work.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Do you have advice for those who haven't been able to take your class, but this whole exercise to understand gestures and mannerisms, things that they can actually apply? Because I think about how that's actually, when I'm at the workplace and I see people, sometimes the way that I read people is based on how I would do something. Yeah. Right? So if I'm in a good mood or happy or whatever, I display certain attributes and I'll be maybe more jokey or whatever it is. And I expect, if that person's not doing that, they must not be in a great mood. And so I'm totally misreading that person or that situation. So can you share some practical tips people can do to not misread people that they're working with or people they see in the hallway? Part
of it is just paying attention, like you were saying about your coworker who notices. And so if there's some variation, then she speaks up. Right. But yeah, I can share with you some resources. There's some quizzes online that people can take about how good are you at emotion perception, and they show you different faces of people you've never seen before, different genders, different global backgrounds, and you can submit your answers. It spits out, some points for you, like, oh, you probably should have known this was here because this person's eyes are really wide and things like that. But, of course, more important than that is just this increased attention to the issue and trying to facilitate conversations about it.
I think I actually took one of those quizzes now that you mentioned it.
Oh.
It was like all these different faces on the screen.
Yeah.
And you had to like judge like mood.
Right.
I failed miserably.
What?
I took the test going, I thought I was doing really well.
Yeah.
And then I got the results back. My wife did really well at the test. Like she was like really good at reading people's faces and moods. Mm-hmm. And I was like terrible. My results were totally off. And I was like, oh, I totally misread these faces.
The good thing about it is it's not an inherent talent. It's something that you can train yourself to become better at. So don't think of it as diagnostic. Just think of it as something that could give you something to work on.
Right. You're not terminally bad at it.
I'm like an optimist. I always see I'm always like, I judge things like better than they are. Mm-hmm. And so my wife's more skeptical. So she doesn't. But she was much more accurate. And I remember talking to her about my results and she's like, really? You thought that was, an honest face or an honest expression?
Yeah.
I thought, yeah. She's like, no, totally not.
Some of my students who want extra practice, I have them, if they feel it's too risky in person to keep asking people, oh, so what was that? Your eyebrow raised. What was that? If they feel that's too risky, sometimes I say, well, I guess you could practice, by watching a TV show with the sound off, not a TV show you've watched before, but one that you have never seen. And then you can try to guess what's happening or guess what the emotions are, and then go back and hear the dialogue, watch it again with the sound on, and rewrite. Yeah.
That's good advice. Yeah. We've talked a lot about being able to read people and pick up on those little cues. I want to know more about if you have advice for your students for actually approaching someone. I know you said your students had to, gain the courage to really ask someone, oh, how are you doing? Or what was that? For other people who are more nervous or more introverted or maybe don't feel like they have that trust with that person, how would they approach?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, you're pointing to something which is just about the inherent at work, which is if I don't trust, then I'm worried about how my action is going to be perceived. If I'm not in a work culture or work unit where it's normal to talk about these things, then I'm kind of putting myself out there by doing something different from others and also something different from what I've normally done. Right. So I think it's important to try to diagnose the closeness of the relationship to start with. Maybe start with somebody who is closer to you. Also being willing to disclose how some news hit you or how you're feeling. Maybe it's maybe there's a reorg and you were both affected by it, and you, or maybe somebody's on leave and that's affecting your workload. And for sharing how you are dealing with it and asking the person, oh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's affecting you as well. Then you don't have to, it's not like, I'm watching you in this creepy way and I'm trying to pin some emotion on you. Am I right or wrong? Because then I can tell my wife that I actually got something right. It's more about what it is that why do you want to know? And so expressing the fact that so-and-so had to go on leave. I'm so sorry for them that they're sick, but it is affecting me. I've had to stay late a couple nights. And I just wanted to see how it's affecting you. Maybe we could find some ways to help each other through this week or something like that. Because that's really the intention, right? Is to be cooperating better or to be understanding better and not so much about, am I getting it right or wrong?
Right.
Right. So think about your intention, and then that'll go a long way, because then you'll have all that in your mind when you're asking, and then you're can also convey that to the other person.
It's kind of like not knowing just to know, but more like connecting.
Yeah.
It's like an empathy give and take.
That's right. It's the empathy, it's the compassion, and it's connection. So
that's really good advice. So you spoke at our Women in Experian International Women's Week this year, and your talk was about me balance. So I was wondering if you could expand more on what you talked about for our listeners who obviously weren't at the event.
So one of the things I was trying to convey in that short time I had at Experian was that me balance is so broad. There are a lot of different ways to think about balance at work. And I was encouraging people to think about all the different factors that could contribute. So, of course, the natural one is kind of work and then home life balance. But then there's also how do I need to balance short and long-term career goals? Am I balancing between my individual needs and my team's needs? And I think I gave a handout that was sort of like, how much am I analyzing? How much am I sort of intuiting? How much am I asserting? How much am I listening? So I kind of tried to bring up different dichotomies or scales where people could think about, where am I falling on this? And most of me balance really is part of reflection. And, it's a privilege to have the chance to reflect at work. Sometimes we have to be so responsive and so reactive, but when you can, being intentional and being reflective about your own patterns and your own ways that you're operating can be leading to balance. Because how can you, after all, really have balance without this reflection and then little adjustments, little course corrections?
Right.
And then we were talking also about the notion of trying to break habits with little adjustments every day, trying new things. And so I was kind of telling about some of my classes and where I ask students not just do written assignments. Written assignments are great to show your reflection, but in fact, I have my students do these little challenges at work, fully employed students, where they're doing, let's say you have a hard time with perfectionism. Okay. And so that one hit a chord. So the students who self-identify as being pretty perfectionistic, I ask them to reveal something that they cared about and they failed at to someone in their lives. It could be a family member, it could be a coworker. But I ask them to do that once a day for 7 to 10.
Wow,
7 to 10 days. Yeah. And I mean, and I ask them to do it every day. I mean, if you're trying to keep up this pretense that you can be perfect,
right,
and you hate failing, I'm asking them to embrace that and to talk about it. And then they, through this challenge, then have to report back their experience of it. Now, of course, this is very, very difficult for some people. Yeah. And they say, I told my son something that I failed at the first day. I told my coworker some project that I worked 6 months on, 9 months on, a year on, and it didn't get more resources and it failed. And, and then they tell me what they learned from that. And they say, I found out it was okay. Or I found out that other people had these failures, and it connected them. But that was just one of the challenges. So there are other ones too.
That's hardcore, because I was like, it's one thing to go journal this, right?
Right.
That's one thing.
Right.
Go, okay, this is hard.
Right.
I want to write out my
one
failures.
Time, just journal.
Right. But it's like, no. I want you to go talk to someone.
Every single
that's
day.
Like so much more difficult.
Okay, well, actually, the people who reported having the most difficult time in these challenges were the people who I asked to unplug for an hour a day. So that I gave them 3 options.
Oh, okay.
One is for the perfectionists.
Yeah.
One is for the people who feel like they're just constantly on and never can let their mind rest and are just constantly being inundated with emails and notifications and their phone, really. Yep. And and this really comes from when I ask students to try not to use their phone during our class time conversations. And so I said, if you're having a hard time with that, you might want to do this part of the challenge, this option in the challenge. And a lot of them chose to do it. It's kind of like, I don't want to do it on my own, but if you make me, I want someone to make me turn my phone off. So they said, they reported, I took a walk. I noticed things on my walk that I never would have. I talked to somebody in my family more. I didn't have it at the dinner table. I tasted my food better. Like my digestion and things that I never would have I wouldn't have thought of when I was assigning. And then, so that was one of the challenges. And then the other challenge option was, if you're the type of person who constantly thinks, if only this, then I'll be happy. Or if only this, then I can relax, right? If I just make it to director level, or if once I get this client on board, then I can stop, or smooth sailing. Right. Then I'll be happy. Once I get that title, I'll be happy. And it's this if only trap that really affects us. And so I have those students participate in a gratitude journal. And there you go with the journaling. I like that. Yeah. But then I also, in one of my classes, and this is part of the closing residential for the fully employed students, they're asked to, and this is part of a larger module, but they're asked to reflect on their journey in their MBA. And I give them an opportunity to write a thank you letter to somebody who has helped them along the way. It could be a faculty member, it could be a family member who supported them and put up with their absence at home, or somebody who financially backed their degree. And so these are the three challenges where I'm trying to.
Those are really good challenges.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it's been really rewarding for me to see, because like I said, reflection is very valuable, but trying to day by day break our habits for the better, right? I'm getting in my own way sometimes when it comes to my own well-being. And sometimes we need just nudges.
Yeah. Oh man. As you were chatting, so one of my bosses in the past would say, whenever you presented something, he wanted to know the failures first before the successes. Mm-hmm. So it's very often when you get presentations at work, you're sharing here's all these good things we just achieved, right? Mm-hmm. He was like, I want to know what failed first. Mm-hmm. I want to see how ambitious you were.
Yeah.
Because part of being innovative and being creative means that you're testing things, and he wants to know. And so that was kind of a freeing exercise to go here's all my failures.
Yeah.
And I had another friend of mine who works at a company who's saying that's really important that people are sharing the failures along the way, because that shows innovation. It shows you're trying. It shows the experiments.
You cannot get innovation and creativity without acknowledging that failure is part of it. It has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, even the world's most innovative people talk about this. Sarah Blakely has a few YouTube videos about the Spanx CEO. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she talks about it, how at the dinner table when she was growing up, her dad would say, what did you fail at today? And if you didn't have something that you failed at, that means you didn't try anything new. So it's a complete redefinition of failure. It's not that you weren't good enough. It's that, hey, your job is to try new things and to learn new things. And if you're at you're going to fail sometimes. And that I congratulate you, because that means you're doing something new.
I like it, right? That's really good.
Yeah. I was just talking to my son about it. He's 7, and we were talking, he said something about failing, and I was trying to kind of do this exact thing with him. I wasn't going to show him his idea. Yeah, I wasn't going to show him the Spanxy YouTube video. But I said, well, if you're learning to shoot baskets and you're standing so close to the basket that you make every single one, are you learning anything? Mm-hmm. He said, no. And I said, well, then you know where you need to stand. You need to stand where you're making some and you're missing some. And those misses are part of your learning. Mm-hmm. That shows you're doing the right thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really good. All those lessons and challenges, I feel like, are so small, and it just requires little energy to actually do them. But then the effect of it.
Huge impact.
Yeah, because all those things, like even just for me personally, like being a perfectionist, I want to sweep all my failures under the rug. If someone talks about something I failed at, I was like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, it's the past. We don't need to talk about it ever again. Yeah. And that kind of thinking can be debilitating, especially at work sometimes, because it starts to feel like I don't want to try something new because I don't want to fail at it, and I don't want to talk about my failures. I don't want to do this, and I feel like
you're probably your harshest critic.
Oh yeah, totally.
And if you shared your, in this particular case, if you shared it, you might find some more compassion for yourself just through the compassion of others.
Yeah.
And understanding, their understanding of it or their sense making of it might shed new light on it for you.
Exactly. For like your coworkers or your peers or your managers to be like, it's not a big deal.
And what a gift. What a gift that you would be giving that to your coworkers, for them to be able to be failing at something too. I mean, our leaders cannot be putting on airs of perfection, because that only hurts everybody. So give that gift if you're in a leadership role, or if you work with others closely and can show that. I think that's great.
I think that is a big gift. There was a story I heard about somebody who I respect. He was talking about his mentor, that his mentor was his hero, and his mentor could do no wrong. And at one point, part of that mentorship mentor was like, he realized that this person looks up to me a lot and respects me a lot, but he needs to see all of me. And so he shared like some failings to kind of like set him straight. Like, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, and it kind of helped him like realize, this is like, he's human. And that's like an important part of like growing.
I think when it comes down to it, it's just like humanizing each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
And I like also your advice around getting people to turn off the notifications, to do that technology detox to help build self-awareness. I did a day-long technology detox at a monastery down in Oceanside.
Yes.
And so I got there like at 5 a.m. and there was like monks chanting. It was basically everyone was there.
When you don't talk?
Yeah, this is when you silent retreat. So there's no technology and no talking at the facility. And so everyone's there for the same reason. So it's great for introverts because you didn't talk to anybody. But basically, like, everyone's there. Like, you eat meals together, but no one's talking. You kind of like nod and you see people.
I've done that too.
I found the day felt like a week.
Yeah.
Like when you don't have a phone and no computer, it's like you just bring books and a notepad. I felt like...
But you were, most importantly, you could hear your own thoughts, right? Yeah. I mean, so often our own thoughts get crowded out by all these notifications, all these external calls for our attention, not literal calls, but these things calling for us to answer or look, respond, read, and it's I don't know if you remember you before you had a smartphone.
Yep.
That there's more me there to be had before a smartphone. So the me balance, you have to find the you to begin with. And I think there's so much to be said for having some limits for ourselves on our own screen time.
That's right.
Not just kids. A lot of people like talking about it for kids. Right. We need it for ourselves. Let's find our own thoughts.
Yeah, I try to set limitations for myself around when I get home from work, with my phone in the room. So I want to model like that behavior to my kids. See, when dad's home, the phone is, I don't even see it.
Yeah.
And as a default, I have notifications off. Because I don't want to be like, I'll look at my phone when I can. Usually it's like text message from my wife, and that's the only thing that I'm really looking at. But I've set boundaries.
Yes.
Because it's so easy to keep notifications on, and all of a sudden, and even when I'm at work, no notifications because I'm focused on a project. I don't want to get Outlook notifications.
Yeah.
Or an IM or a Slack message. Like all that is off because I have to focus.
That's great. I think we did talk about intentionality at that Women's Day event, and it was just part of that was exactly what you're talking about. This feeling of being split between so many different things, it's really disruptive. I mean, I think maybe I joked, and I always joke about like, that's how Voldemort created the last Horcrux. It wasn't like killing somebody. It was like extreme multitasking.
Exactly.
And it really like, for me, it feels like it's pulling my soul apart to be monitoring 7 different things at any given time. And that's a gift that you're giving yourself by blocking the time and saying, this is what I'm focusing on. I think it's going to take an hour. So I'm turning everything off. After that hour's done, I'll check, see if there's any emergency. Probably there wasn't.
The world didn't end.
Right.
And I actually gave myself that time to focus.
Yeah. I feel like at work, there's so many things, like you said, so many things pulling our attention. There's the emails, there's instant messaging, there's, then you have all the stuff happening at work, and then you have your phone with everything else happening there. And you are kind of, it's very easy to be torn. It's so important to set boundaries. You go, I get to work, my phone goes in the drawer. And I told Patty, like, one of my practices now is I'm trying not to bring my phone into meetings. When I go into a meeting, like, I'm just there with a notepad. That's it.
Well, and I've been challenging my students to think about how to be more productive when you're there, and how to just, there's a recent study on how much time people spend on social media and just not productive time at work. I applaud those companies who are doing some experiments of how can we pilot programs for a 30-hour work week or less time at work, because if you just get people to be more productive on the hours that they're there, can we give them back that time? That's really important. But I mean, even just the notion of, it doesn't have to be an hour meeting. If we're all there and we're all focused and we aren't each on our laptop, we're focused on the conversation, maybe you can get that conversation done in 30 minutes and not 60 minutes.
That's right.
And so that's like the meetings version of what you're saying with the intentionality that you're giving a project. It can translate to up to this group level too.
Yeah, totally. I think part of the issue too is like, at least for me in my generation, I feel like we really glorify being busy. Like, it's kind of just like, I didn't get any sleep last night. Like, congrats. Like, what do I say to that? But it's almost like people are like showing off, like, I got this amount of hours of sleep. Like, I got 3 hours. And it's just like, I feel like I'm supposed to be busy at all times. I feel like I'm supposed to be good at multitasking. And it's funny because we were just talking earlier this week that multitasking isn't a real thing. Multitasking is kind of just like what you mentioned. It's like you're just being distracted by so many different things. You're not being able to like focus on any one thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing people need to learn in the workplace is like being busy doesn't mean that you're necessarily like being productive or doing your job. Like, you don't need to feel like you're being spread out thin to succeed.
And great that you can put your finger on what the norm is. I mean, just an awareness that, wow, this is the implicit message that I'm getting from all these conversations is it's good to be constantly busy. It's good to be just stretching at your limit of how little sleep you can get and still sort of be a safe driver. I mean, that's not something to brag about for most people, but it can become that if that's how the conversation's happening all around you. And so great that you can call that out.
I think because of that, people's mental health starts to deteriorate at work. It's like, I'm supposed to do a 12-hour shift. Like, maybe I should.
Definitely.
Yeah. And people get burnt out so easily.
Yeah, we need to, on the whole, look for more systematic ways to ease that burden of that expectation. I think you're right about that.
Advice for leaders to help them improve the mental health of their teams.
I think, so here's the thing. Every person might approach mental health in a different way. And that's good because there's got to be a multi-pronged approach. So if somebody is really interested in meditation, they might be able to share that with their team. somebody who's interested in creating a fun space for people to go hang out. Yes, that's part of it too. And I think what leaders could overall be really facile at is not just thinking about leadership training as how do I motivate people better, but one of the trainings you could try to instill in an organization is more mental health training and how to facilitate conversations. And I love the idea of people being able to check in with each other and making that more normal in workplace conversations. It's It's not, I don't always see that. I see some organizations that actually ban people from having a photo of their family on their desk because it's, okay, we're going to have boundaries. So you don't want there to be a bleed over, right? And what message is that sending? Sounds kind of harsh, but it's actually, it can happen, right? And that can happen metaphorically in other ways too. And so does the leader herself or himself portray an humanness, openness to conversations about how something is affecting people? I train my students, you're going to be deciding a lot of things along the way. You have to first decide whether to delegate, whether to decide on your own. And then you're going to have to announce that decision. So how you announce that decision is very, very important because it conveys all of your intentions as we come back to the beginning, right? It conveys your intentions for how that affects people's lives, how it affects the way they're going to receive their work, how it affects the way they're going to communicate. So it's not just one conversation where you deliver the news. It's not just one email that you type off in the morning. It's circling back to people. Now that you've had a chance to think about it for 2 days, tell me what adjustments we need to make this easier on you. Let's talk about what resources you might need to achieve the new goal. Now that things have shifted. So these kind of conversations show caring and they show,
that's right.
humanity, right? So that's part of it. I also teach a lot about conflict resolution. And of course, we know that people can should have a lot of differing opinions at work. Sometimes you can get a lot of task-related conflict. You can also, of course, have stylistic conflict, personality conflict. And the extent to which a leader is good at facilitating mediation conflict and conflict resolution can be so important. Conflicts, I don't know if you've seen it, right? But conflicts can be very, very costly. And I don't think people think enough about that. The fact that conflict can take your mental space.
That's right.
People can get sick because of stress. You can have absenteeism. You can have more turnover. That's right. You can have, of course, it can escalate into legal battles, but even at the kind of lower level, it can be people aren't sharing information, gaps in communication, more mistakes are made. The cost of conflict is very, very high and so much higher than people, I think, perceive. Right. So the extent to which you're active in this conversation, you're catching these conversations early before it bubbles over into, well, I'm going to send you to HR and whatever it is that's not owning that, it's like a caretaking role of the well-being of the relationships within the team and seeing the value of that for the end product, whatever service or product you're providing. Conflict is very hurtful to our work productivity, our work lives.
Right. And I think if more people understood that, they'd make it more of a priority to focus on.
Yeah.
Like, it actually impacts business. It's not just like
that's right.
Culture thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And conflict can lead to new ideas. Conflict can lead to, so not demonizing it in and of itself, but seeing it as a function of a good leader is to be able to understand why there's conflict. We've got to strike a better balance between creativity and efficiency. Or, we've got to understand why we're overpromising on this. There's a lot of different things where this conflict isn't just coming out of nowhere, right? And so we need to understand, diagnose, and be able to resolve. Because so much anger and perceived unfairness actually at work can be very, very corrosive to well-being. that prolonged stress is very corrosive.
So my last question is this, because we've been talking about being self-aware, taking time for yourself. And for those listening who have not done that, I was wondering if maybe you can share some advice for those who are like, you know what, I was listening to Dr. Young. She's right. I need to start to take time for myself, be journaling, thinking about my progress in life, things I want to achieve. Advice for them who are just starting out for the very first time. Because I know when I first started, it can be very scary just being in silence.
Yes.
And like 5 minutes of silence can be like, how long has it been? An hour? Like, no, it's only been like 5 minutes and you've been sitting there meditating.
Yes. Yeah. All I can say is start somewhere. And again, focus on one thing. Don't try to do everything at once. I don't ask people to do all 3 challenges at the same time, right? I will ask them to start somewhere and give themselves the credit too for being able to shift a habit. That's hard. Shifting at one little habit is very, very hard. Whether you go to sleep with your phone next to your bed, and if you're able to just shift that one habit, that's a win. And then you go from there. And so I think I would start somewhere. And if somebody has a hard time knowing where to start, I think they could look to a mentor. I always recommend having a personal board of directors. But then, you could just be very practical about it too. You could say, I'm going to look at my last performance review, and I'm going to look at something that at first glance, I didn't want to own. And I said, oh, that's just because of this one situation where I didn't do well enough and it was a hard task or it was a bad quarter or whatever it was, and you discounted it. Take a look at that one thing that maybe you didn't want to sit with, and then dive deeper into it. Maybe ask more questions about how you could have done something differently, and then work with that. But I think it really is important just to start somewhere and to do it with someone else. Do it in conversation with a coworker, with a colleague, with a friend, family member, and just have some, I love intentionality and accountability and intention setting around it. So start somewhere and start small. Don't expect yourself to be a totally different person in 1 month. Do one little thing for the next 3 weeks and see and reflect on how you experienced it. Reflect on whether you want to keep that, and reflect on how it changed yourself and others. The thing about these challenge questions that I ask people to do is more often than not, people say, I thought it would change the way my mood, or I thought it might change my sleep, or I thought it might change the way I was thinking about things. And then I realized it was affecting people around me. Yeah.
This is a really good conversation.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak and just to share a little bit.
It's all very valuable.
Oh, thanks.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Level Up.
If you'd like to see a summary of today's show, you can go to the Experian blog. The short URL is just ex.pn/levelup.
If you found any of the information today helpful, please consider supporting us by hitting subscribe or leaving us a review. Thanks for dropping in and giving us a listen, and we hope to see you again for our next episode.